Guys, I'm gonna move on to question 4. I've got a few minutes here to get through this. In the UK, we're pretty good, generally speaking, at developing female pole vaulters, up to a level around 420, and then with the boys, between 5 and 540. We've become pretty good at that. Where we have less success is taking those 420 female pole vaulters and making them 470 jumpers, or taking those 530, 540 guys and making them 580 jumpers. So, from your perspectives, what's the biggest difference between getting people to the level here and then making them a top 20 in the world kind of level? What's the most significant difference, do you think, for that development from there to there? Gustav, maybe if I come to you first.
Yeah, I thought some about it, and like in Sweden we have similar. On the women's side, we have a lot of girls coming up to 410, 420, and they just stop there. And for girls, I think the biggest difference between those girls jumping in Sweden 410, 420, or we have 3 athletes who jump 460 plus, it's like the energy and the poles. Most of the girls, they got stuck on these 420 poles. They come to that level and they're not able to take the next step to go on a longer pole, or working on their transfer so they can get more energy of the jump. So I think it's a bit of a mental game to understand that just because you're a girl, you should not stop at this level. If you have the abilities, just try it. Maybe it doesn't work, but try it out. On the boys' side, I wouldn't say it's all mental, because I think the mental game can come in a bit earlier. In Sweden, we have seen over the years a lot of guys who comes to a slightly lower level, like a 5 meter level, and they have problem taking the step from 5 meter to like 540, because they just don't have it in them mentally. Like, they're not ready to put in the work. But it's also a cultural thing. When I was a boy, jumping like 450, and well, my first goals was maybe to get in the national team or doing the match against Finland, the annual match. You have to be top 3 in Sweden, and I looked at the other guys, and it was a 550 level, 560 level to get at that level, at that kind of competitions. So when I was jumping 520, I felt it was like nothing. I need to improve and just take the next steps. But not these days. 520 is good enough to make the match. It's good enough to make a medal, and the gap is so big to Melker and Mondo, who's like, for everyone, the gap to Mondo is big. But yeah, but the thing is, like, when they jump 5 meter, 520, they feel like, okay, I have no chance catching those 2 guys, and I'm already top 3 in Sweden, so I'm done. And the next step to get to 550 or is maybe 560 now to qualify for the European champs. I think it's 560 now. They feel like that step is too big, so they just lose motivation.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I hadn't really thought about it from that kind of cultural perspective, but yeah, you're right. There's something in that, and I don't want to go down the kind of political route and talk about the field event agenda and how we're kind of constantly kind of being put to one side and made it more and more difficult for us to have these sorts of opportunities. That's not where I want to go with this. But if maybe I can pick up on your point about the mental side of things, particularly on the women's side, because I was going to ask, is the barrier to them using longer poles and using higher grips and transferring more energy, is it physical, technical, or mental? And you've kind of suggested that maybe it's mental. But do you think that will change with time? Because the women's event is still only 20 years old, right? And we've still only seen 3 women jump 5 meters. And I'm sure if we have this conversation in 20 years' time, that number will have gone through the roof. Do you think it will just take time for more and more and more women to come through? Or do you think there is something specifically we should be doing with our coaching?
I think it's like Steve was referring to earlier about the transfer. Like, you have to focus a lot of having a good transfer to being able to do these things, because most of the girls, when they get this at this certain point, they feel like maybe the pole is a bit too stiff, maybe I don't roll it as well, and then the mental game kicks in. If you've been trained early to have a good transfer, the transition is going to be more easier, I think.
Okay, so teaching that, and it kind of reinforces the point we made earlier about teaching the importance of that takeoff efficiency and that transfer of energy at such a young age, that's ingrained, and then they have that confidence to take with them when they need it at the harder points of their career.
Yeah,
it's a great point. It's a really great point. Steve, maybe I can come to you next with the same question. What's going to make the biggest difference from transitioning in these guys from a good national level or age group kind of jumper to a top 20 in the world at senior level?
Yeah, I think the big thing as coaches, our job is to maximize the potential of the athletes we work with. And if you think about the physical abilities and technical ability of your boulders, some people 4 meters and 5 meters is their maximum level. And I can think of quite a few girls in Britain who've jumped 420 in the last kind of 5 or 10 years, and that was kind of right about their level. So one of the big things is you can jump 420 or 550 with average physical abilities and good technical training and 10 years of hard work, but to be able to jump 580 and 470, you need good physical properties. We know they've got to be running at least 8.3 or 9.3 meters per second. They've got to be using 440 or 5 meters or 510 poles. They've got to be gripping much higher and pushing further than the average jumper. But how to achieve that, I think, it's a lot of it is environment based. You're not going to do that working with mum and dad, living in the middle of the forest, training twice a week. You need the daily training environment needs to be right. You need the full infrastructure around you. You need to be working at a place where there's sports medicine, sports science support. You can access facilities all the time. You need good competition in the summer and the winter. You need the total package. And that's where, the professional environment is important. And people need to relocate to do that. You and I know, Scott, there's been many athletes in Britain haven't changed environment and suffered because of it. They could have been much better than what they've been in their career. But it's part of performance management now, and I think it's jobs of federations that they need to be independently advising athletes and parents possibly about the best place for their athlete to be. And some hard decisions need to be made. And really, if you're not working to try to get to the top Olympic level, you need to be working with a full-time coach in a full-time environment, because that coach needs to be able to travel to competitions, needs to be able to spend 30 hours a week with you for training. And somebody who's got a full-time job, it's hard for them to do that. Even if their passion is to do it, it's just not physically possible, So I think it's all about the daily training environment and getting that right. That's the big difference in taking people with the right physical properties from being national level vaulters to international level vaulters.
No, it's that environmental piece it's a really valid point. It's really useful to kind of hear that and reinforce that. But I think you're right. The point that you struck on there is that if you are going to jump 580 as a guy and 470 as a female vaulter, that you've got to have some physical tools behind that. There's got to be some physicality there, and I'm sure it's not the first time we've heard the best methodology is to just spot the right talent and get the right talent into the event, right? If you don't have that, then maybe at that level, like you say, you've got no shot.
I mean, what one thing is, I spoke to a leading Russian coach once, and I said to him, "How do you make pole vaulters faster?" And he looked at me and he said, "Better selection." That's the key. If we aren't working with super talented people, then it's pretty hard to produce really high results. So the selection process is key. And I think in pole vault, half the time we get the leftovers. The people that don't make it as sprinters or don't make it as long jumpers or kind of fall into the event. I mean, you look at guys like Renaud. Renaud's fantastic pole vaulter. But could Renaud have done any other event in track and field at Olympic level?
Point. Yeah.
Imagine if we had some of the absolute physical specimens of the world that have set world records in long jump or high jump or other events like is it Robez, the girl who's doing triple jump now? Imagine if she was a pole vaulter, you know, with those physical tools. You know?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point. Gustav, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, just like a quick note of different environments. So when I was really young, I think I was 18 years old, I traveled to Ukraine, to Donetsk, for training camp. I was there for a month by myself, and I trained with that group, and they focused extremely of everything to perfection in drills, and I was like the worst of them all. Like I couldn't do the drills half as good as the other guys did. But when it came to pole vaulting, I had the ability to take like all my bad skills to put together to a vault. I was jumping maybe 530 at the time, but I was as good as those guys. And then a few years later, I came to Leverkusen in Germany, and it was the opposite. Like I was maybe the best there of doing drills. I was running as fast as they did, like Danny Ecke and Richard Spiegelberg and Lars Bergling. I was as good as them in almost every exercise. But then we stepped on the runway, and they just beat it out of me. So the focus in Leverkusen was more to like use your abilities in the pole vaulting, and in Donetsk it was more like everything has to be spot on perfect outside of the runway. So it was two different kind of approaches to the sports there, and it really opened up my eyes to see how to get better.
And Gustav, do you think you can have success in both of those ways? Do you think you can have success with real attention to detail and precision, but also in terms of that natural flowing kind of feeling for the pole?
Like if they are important, like if you're doing, let's say your takeoff is spotless, then there's no need to put in 10 hours a week on fixing this small detail with your little finger at the takeoff. But then maybe your run up is. But those guys, they try to perfect everything.
Okay.
Even if it was good enough to jump a 580, but they was jumping 520 because there were lack of skills in so much other different aspects of the jump.
No, it's a really good point. Really good point. Stephen, to you finally, have you got any thoughts on that transition from good national to great international level, and what the most important aspects of doing that are?
Well, I think all of the above, what already has been said by Gustav and Steve. I think mentally there's definitely a big issue there. But I think also what we talked about before and the discussion that we had a little bit, but feeling and then either efficiency, quality, or do we go for more playful and feeling the pull? I think the difference is that when I look at in Belgium, it's the same way, a little bit like Sweden. You got 5 meter jumpers, and then you have Ben or Artak No is also a good jumper, or Thomas van der Glaatse. Those are the others, and those are above 550. But you have a lot of based on 5 meters. And if I see what's going on, and the same thing can go for the girls, you got some 4 meter jumpers, but then the rest is, there's 2 450 jumpers. But what I see is very important is just the efficiency of the takeoff, is the plant, is the takeoff. And I think a lot of is when they were young, they were taught to take off and plan and run with very light poles, and so a mistake can be made and nobody would tell anything because you can fix that in a later phase or whenever. But when you jump 5 meters, what you might have a couple of thousand jumps already made in your lifetime, and also maybe thousands of mistakes in your run-up because of those small poles. And now you're going to get to the bigger poles, because you need the big poles to get to the 550 or higher, or to the 450 or higher. You need those big poles, and then they didn't get to teach that efficiency because of the lighter poles. They didn't really focus on it. And so I think that efficiency is very important to teach them at a very young age for those even with the small poles. I sometimes give a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old, I give a pole of Ben. I say, okay, try to make him drop like you should do. And then he understands how important it is to have the efficiency in the last steps. And it gets him more motivated to do more drills of it. So I think that's one key point of efficiency in the last plant and the last steps in the takeoff.
Okay. So, okay, yeah, I love that. So summarizing that whole conversation then, assuming that we have the talent to actually go on and jump 580 or 470, we need to have a good foundation of teaching with them from a young age, Stephen. That's kind of your point. They need to have been taught really well from a young age and have that well established, because then tying into Gustav's point, that gives them the mental ability to, well, the physical and technical ability, but also the mental ability to be confident to take bigger poles and bigger grips. And then Steve, taking your point, then we just have to get that in the right environment to really kind of take them on that journey, from national level to international level. So
the bigger poles is used outside the jumping. I mean, I spend as much time with poles next to the pit than on the pit. If I give a slider bigger pole to an athlete to make him more efficient in his run, it's never to jump with, of course. It's more likely just to run with it and not jumping.
Does that? Sorry, Gustav, you go.
Yeah, I have a tip there. Like for Melker especially, he had the past years big problems with transitions from going to the 5-meter poles that he was jumping on shorter run up to the 510 poles, the bigger poles he was competing on, because they were a bit longer and thicker and stiffer. He had problems with the balance of the poles and the last steps. So when he was jumping from like 8 or 10 steps with a smaller pole, we attached a load to the pole, like something you can just wrap around the pole, maybe a meter below his bottom hand, to simulate the weight and the balance of a heavy competition pole. So he was able to take like 20 jumps in a session with the small pole, but the weight of the pole and the balance was similar to the big pole. So even if he was jumping at low intensity with low speed, the pole was dragging him as a 510 pole would. So he was able to develop more stability and control in his upper body and how to position the poles. So when he came out to the full run up with the 510 poles, the transition was so much easier.
Yeah, makes sense. Nice, like it. Stephen, was your response in response to this question that's popped up in the panel here around, are you suggesting that we encourage efficiency by putting our young vaulters on bigger poles? Is what you're saying that, the answer to that is yes, but not necessarily into the box? You would do that in pole runs and other. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I think especially at a younger age, the big and stiffer poles are not the solution to getting your jumper more efficient or more better to jump. I think it's even the contrary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yep.